Welcome to part 4 of the reading of Zen of Cubing. For those of you just joining, parts of this book are offensive, so please proceed with caution if you are easily offended. So, we left off in the middle of chapter 11, Cube Mysteries. One of the most popular forms of cube literature that appeals to all audiences is that of cube mystery. Whether you're young or old, male or female, smart or stupid, you're bound to enjoy a good whodunit. Our selection is none other than a story featuring the famous, legendary Sherlock Holmes, the most masterful mystery articulator of them all. This story, as recounted by the good Dr. Watson, is one of the best. Even if you've read it a dozen times, you'll enjoy reading it again. The Case of the Cuber's Final Solution. Many is the time I've seen the great Sherlock Holmes solve a difficult case, but never was I so impressed with his powers of analytical observation and deductive thinking than when I saw them employed in the case that has come to be known as the Cuber's Final Solution. It all started one evening while I was paying a social visit to Holmes' residence at 221B Baker Street. As usual, Holmes proved a very entertaining host. He displayed his uncanny prowess with the cube, creating unique patterns of colors with disarming rapidity. Good gracious, man, how do you do that? I never cease to be awed with his cubing skills. Elementary, my dear Watson. Any child who can add the numbers 1 plus 1 and arrive at 2 can do these things with a cube. I fear I had quite broken the magic of the moment, for he similarly tossed the cube into a pile of bric-a-brac he had collected from some number of previous cases. I say, Holmes, isn't that? I never finished my question, for there sounded on the door a loud, rapid knocking. Holmes smiled. Come in, Tommy, he said. I never had the chance to ask Holmes how he knew it was Tommy, for the young neighborhood boy burst in and spewed forth the most amazing bit of news. Mr. Holmes, sir, pardon me, and hello to you too, Dr. Watson. There's been something terrible happened at the Crown Hall down the road, sir, and I thought the lad had to stop for air. He was so excited. Easy there, Tommy, said Holmes, leaning back in his high-backed chair and lighting his pipe. Nothing could be so important as to cause you to die of strangulation. No, sir, maybe not, sir, but all the same, England's champion cuber done been murdered. Not by 5 minutes, I swear. Holmes jumped to his feet, gathered his cape and coat, and then stopped to look at me. Well, are you coming along, or aren't you? He demanded. But where are you going? I managed to blubber. Confound, man, to solve the case. Of course, I leaped up, and I followed him forthwith. Reginald Outrigg, the reigning Cuber champion of England for 6 years running, had been stabbed in the chest while in his dressing room at the Crown Hall. He had been preparing for a charity cubing contest against a new cuber hotshot from Liverpool. Holmes and I looked down at his body. His cube was still in his hand. I was quite touched. I knew Holmes was too, but he was acting as a professional and couldn't reveal his emotion at this most critical time. Inspector Winklebottom, Scotland Yard, was just finishing some notes on his final interview. Thank you, Mrs. Alridge. You get some rest now. Holmes interjected with presumed authority, an authority that comes from confidence, not arrogance. Do you mind if I ask a few questions, Inspector Winklebottoms? Oh, I should have figured you'd be here before too long. Ask him now as soon as later, I suppose, though I'll have all you need in the official report. Holmes merely smiled. Winklebottom snorted. This here's Sauter Walcott, Alridge's trainer and manager. Holmes shook his hand. Our country has lost a great cuber, Mr. Walcott. We owe it to cubers the world over to find the murderer. Anything I can do to help, Mr. Holmes, I will. The old fellow, bald and with quite an unhealthy paunch, seemed genuinely shaken by the incident. Holmes began the questioning. You must have been quite close to Aldridge. You've been his manager for 9 on 10 years, I believe. The man nodded. Tell me, was Aldridge a gambling man? Did he have any debts needing paying off? Any he was late in paying? The man was justly insulted. I was myself amazed at Holmes' impetuosity. I couldn't help but reprimand him. See here, Holmes, I ventured, that's no way to talk to the manager of the highly respected Aldridge. Holmes gave me but one warning look. I checked myself and sealed my lips. I believe I mumbled something about seeing to the health of the widow. Fortunately, I managed to overhear the rest of the questioning. Walcott replied that Aldridge had no connection with any figure of the underworld. He stayed away from it, though the temptation was high for one with money and fame. After all, said Walcott, he couldn't be doing charity cubing contests if he was in need of money, now could he? I don't know. Would he? Said Holmes. Well, he might, at that. Always did too many of them, from my point of view. Anyway, for what that's worth. Holmes studied the face of Walcott more carefully. He then turned to the nattily attired young man who looked to have no problem with the woman. You're Jimmy Cook, the supposed brash young cuber from Liverpool. I've seen your picture in the Time. This was to have been your first match with Aldridge. Am I not correct? Yes, I'm sorry, the chap died. Now they'll never know I was capable of beating the champion. Inspector Winklebottom jumped in. See here, lad, that's just the kind of thing that makes you our number one suspect. Holmes, we've got a report that he had a private cubing match with Aldridge early in the day and was soundly beaten. They had quite an argument after that. There's justification to believe he killed Aldridge to avoid being embarrassed at the evening match. Holmes paid no heed to Winklebottom's theory. It seemed to make perfect sense to me. Instead, Holmes pulled a terribly scrambled key from his pocket. What say we race, young Jimmy? Jimmy laughed and shook his head. Winklebottom demanded to know how Holmes could insult the grievous occasion. Pay attention and you'll learn, Inspector Winklebottoms. Let me put it this way. Jimmy, if you compete with me, I think I can get you off the hook. Jimmy's eyes brightened. But I haven't my cube. Walcott darted for the cube and Aldrid's blood smeared. Here, use. Holmes moved faster than a cold wind and grabbed Walcott's wrist. Don't touch that cube, he glared at everyone in the room. Don't anyone touch it. At that point, someone offered a scrambled cube to Jimmy Cook. Are you sure you want to do this, Mr. Holmes? I don't want to ruin your reputation. I'm faster than Ulrich ever was. We'll soon see. Go. They commenced to solve their cubes with great speed and dexterity. I admit I've never seen anyone move as fast as Jimmy, but I also must admit that Holmes was not moving as fast as he could. Was he playing with young Jimmy? What mysterious, ingenious plan was Holmes executing? Jimmy finished before Holmes. It wasn't a record by any means, but under the circumstances that would have been expecting too much of the man. Amazing, said Holmes, yet I really don't know what I could have done to go any faster. Jimmy glanced at Holmes' cube. There are quite a few things you could have done, if I may. Holmes handed the cube to Jimmy. Jimmy showed him. I didn't understand what they were talking about. I know something in cubing, but not on the high level that Holmes and Jimmy operate on. Brilliant, said Holmes. You've made quite an impression on me, young man. Inspector Winklebottom pointed to the woman who sat beside me, Mrs. Aldrich. That's the widow Holmes. I don't mean to sound cruel, but she's on my list too. Of course you don't mean to sound cruel, Inspector. You're simply doing your job. Only my years of close association with Holmes enabled me to detect the subtle, condescending sarcasm in his voice. And forgive me for my stupidity, is the motive. Winklebottom assumed an air of smugness. The motive? Well now, Holmes, it'd be obvious to any seasoned Scotland Yard detective. It's the money. Hello, you don't mean to say, Holmes was toying with him. It's very possible she may have killed him for his money. It's obvious he stayed close to the coin. Look at her clothing. Baggy, drab, second-hand. She wanted to have some fun with the money, and the only way she could get it, Winklebottom gestured to the dead Aldrich. I dare say the poor woman burst into tears. Come now, Winklebottoms, I replied angrily. After all, the woman was more or less under my care at the moment. That's no way to treat the bereaved. If you're wrong, and I think you are, I demand that you apologize to this dear woman on your knee. There, Watson, said Holmes. There's always an awkward moment with the close survivors, but you are correct in that Mrs. Aldrich is innocent. Yes, Mrs. Aldrich, may I be so bold as to announce that you do to have a child in 6.5 months. Mrs. Aldrich looked up with the slightest trace of a smile. That's right, exactly 6.5 months to the day. How did you know that, Holmes? I asked. Watson, from observing the size of her midsection. Winklebottom protested that this does not make her innocent. But it does destroy your case, Inspector. The poor woman didn't need money to buy clothes. I'm sure she has her large wardrobe to buy clothing, but due to her temporary size, she needs larger clothes, so she borrowed some. She impresses me at not an extravagant spender, probably from her mother from the duration of her pregnancy. Mrs. Aldrich said he was correct. Winklebottom began to mutter when Holmes continued. Aldrich was a good, clean, charitable man. I don't think a good cuber like he would have married a woman any less than his equal. Certainly she'd be more concerned with properly raising her children than with having free reign of her husband's earnings. I don't think she'd kill the father of her child. Winklebottom's frowned. Well, like I said, this Jimmy Cook here is still the number one suspect. I don't see why, offered Holmes. Winklebottom stomped his foot and raised his voice. Because he wanted to eliminate his biggest competitor, the only man who could solve a cube faster than he. Hardly, I think you could have beaten Aldrich tonight, and Jimmy thinks so too. Why bother killing him? You think you could have beaten him? But I don't, and I'm the official inspector. What about their match this afternoon? Holmes smiled and looked at Jimmy. Jimmy is a smart competitor. He knew he'd be nervous the first time he challenged the champion, so he did it in an unofficial private meeting, got the bugs out of his system, so to speak. Earlier, Jimmy showed me some pointers on cubing that shows me he has an absolute cubing genius. I'm familiar with Aldrich's techniques, and they wouldn't have beaten Jimmy's. The loss this afternoon? Blame it on the jitters. A nervous hand that slipped once or twice? I looked at Jimmy and saw that this was true. He said nothing, being too proud to admit why he was defeated. Then why was they arguing? Winklebottoms was too impatient. I knew Holmes would get to the bottom of things soon enough. He was in no hurry. After all, Holmes was now in his glory. He pulled his pipe out and lit it while talking. The argument, I can't say for sure, but it probably concerned Aldrich's retirement. Jimmy, Mrs. Aldrich, and Mr. Walcott all dropped their mouths. Winklebottom laughed. Now, why would a champion in his prime be retiring? But it's true, said Mrs. Aldrich. I'd say in another 6 months, continued Holmes. Just prior to the birth of the child, Aldrich had the money to live comfortably for the rest of his life. He wanted to be the perfect father and spend plenty of time with his child. Impossible for a champion cuber, so he planned to retire 1 month before the championships where Jimmy would have handedly beat him. Nothing infuriates a challenger more than having the champion hand him the crown on a platter without the chance to prove him worthy of himself. I'll question the witness on the matter of the topic of the argument. Holmes, Winklebottom sighed. He hated having to ask his question and delayed it as long as possible, but all eyes were upon him. He succumbed to the pressure. Then who did kill Aldrich? I'm afraid, our dear Slaughters, Walcott is your man. Walcott jumped, and two bobbies grabbed him and held him firm. You can't prove anything, Sherlock Holmes. It's all a guess on your part. All guessing. Holmes puffed rapidly on his pipe. You don't make for much of a challenge, Walcott. You earn 10% of all Aldrich's earnings. When he retires, was to have retired, you'd earn nothing. And Aldrich had prosperity for charities. And again, your earnings are nothing. You commented earlier with a noticeable degree of disdain for a companion and partner of 10 years. That Aldrich gave too much to charity for performances of his cubing skills. That set me to thinking. Holmes paused and exhaled a cloud of air. By the way, from the look of the wound, I'd say you used a scabbard made by the John Rabe tribe of Northeast India that you purchased during Aldrich's world tour of 3 years ago. Am I right? Well, the inspector's men will find it soon enough. You can't have hidden it too far away. Walcott fairly bristled with rage. You gave me the deciding clue, Walcott, when you reached for Aldrich's cube. Besides, the embarrassing gouge act of using a dead champion's cube in a contest, which would have given you a gruesome satisfaction. You realized too late that Aldrich might have left a clue in his arrangement of the cube. Holmes picked up the cube and tossed it to Jimmy. Don't change anything, Jimmy. Just examine it closely. If I'm not mistaken, it's arranged so that there are 2 different ways to solve it in 10 moves. No more, no less. After a moment, Jimmy replied, You're quite right, Mr. Holmes. It's a unique arrangement. I should say so, Jimmy. 43 quintillion to 1 are the odds that it would be arranged like that by accident. It's actually far more difficult to put the cube in that position than to solve it. Winklebottom scratched his head. Precisely, said Holmes. Walcott left it him before he was dead, giving Aldrich the chance to leave us the clue, a clever man. But what's the clue? Asked Winklebottom. He wasn't terribly bright. Even I saw the cube. Elementary, Winklebottom's 2 tens. Only Walcott's association with Aldrich carries 2 tens, 10% of the earnings and 10 years in partnership. Coincidence, shouted Walcott. He found no sympathy. He hung his head and finally grew. Very well, I did it. I hated him for wanting to retire and wanting to do all these profitless charities. I made him what he was. He owed something to me, didn't he? He couldn't just quit and leave me to starve. That's not right, is it? Take him away, said Winklebottom to the bobbies. That was quite a display of reasoning, Holmes, I said to him back in his home. Holmes fought this fight silently in the dim light. I say, Holmes, I knew you were up to something when you muddled your way through that cubing contest. I knew you could go faster. I wanted to give young Jimmy a chance to feel superior. A proud man will boast and share his intelligence, reflecting his true skills, which in this case are great indeed. Well, good thing you didn't embarrass the chap. He'd have given up professional cubing for sure. Holmes seemed surprised by my observation. How do you come to know so much about professional cubers, Watson? I treat a great number of common ailments, cramped fingers, strained eyesight, that sort of thing. Nothing serious, yes? No. That's good. Very good. He smiled and turned away from me. I don't know if he meant it was good that the cubers didn't suffer from anything worse, or good that I didn't treat them for worse. I shall always remember the case of the cuber's final solution. Fortunately, I had the chance to share many other great adventures with Holmes before he retired to Sussex to solve cubes. Perhaps one day I can share another adventure with you. All right. We are moving on to the next chapter, Astrology for Cubing. Having trouble solving the cube and can't figure out why? You think it's merely a matter of physics and statistical planning? Hardly. It takes more than formulas or meditation to solve the cube. It's a solver. You bring more with you, your own character, your persona, your unique identity. The latter have far more to do with solving the cube than you would think. It stands to reason, then, that the more you know yourself, the more you can exercise over the cube. In our desire to help you in solving the cube, we can provide a reliable and accurate astrological guide, and it's related directly to cube solving. You think astrologically is a bunch of mumbo jumbo? Don't laugh. You haven't solved the cube yet, have you? You need every scrap of help you can get, and knowing the traits of your sun sign can't hurt. Aries, March 21st to April 20th. You are fiery, impulsive. As an Aries, you would dash headfirst into your cube, solving, naively thinking a simple solution will be forthcoming merely because you want it to. So, your selfish side will probably be thwarted, and you will soon lose interest if your desired solution is not met immediately. You will never think about the cube. Taurus, April 21st to May 21st. As all folks born with this sign, you are placid and sensible. A Taurus may have the best chance of all the other signs when it comes to solving the cube, and being one, you will stubbornly stick to the task at hand and abandon all life commitments until you solve it. This relentless application will probably bring most success in solving the cube, but you will remain lonely all your life. Gemini, May 22nd to June 21st. The dual sign of Gemini gives you twice the advantage of all other signs, especially if you can stop your restless fidgeting long enough to give cubing a try. You are versatile, clever, and will certainly find a solution somewhere in your reserve of talents, but your inherent impatience, along with not learning by your own mistakes and blaming strangers for your misfortune, are your greatest stumbling blocks. Cancer, June 22nd to July 22nd. You tenacious crab, good luck with cubing, because everyone knows that you think yourself above cubing. Yet you may succeed if you ever could decide with which approach to take. As with most crabs, the direct approach is out of the question. Cancer's patience is a plus for all problem solving, but your susceptibility to howling at the moon may change your mood to be frivolous and you forget where you leave the cube. Your retention abilities are far too limited. Take up rolling beach balls. Leo, July 23rd to August 23rd. Your high-strung, energetic nature may be the reason behind all Leo's first attempts at solving the cube. Your tyrannical pride will be the reason for not putting it down until it's solved. All Leos need to be dominant to feel superior, and you will not let defeat get the better of you, although you will never solve the cube. Cheating is your only salvation. Virgo, August 24th to September 23rd. Poor Virgo. A puzzle such as the cube is like the thorn in your side. Your methodical pickedness will have a field day with cubing, and your natural tendency to be a warrior will not let you quit until you find a working solution. Virgo's need for exactness will not rest with the cube out of order. You simply must put things straight. Libra, September 24th to October 23rd. The alert, intelligent Libra is compelled to seek balance in all things, even cubing. You will carefully weigh all possibilities, analyze all possibilities, and painstakingly find the inevitable balance of colors that your cube requires. No one will understand your solution. Scorpio, October 24th to November 22nd. The determined Scorpio will find a solution to the cube, or shall we all be aware of your wrath? If you should fail, you must have revenge. The seemingly cool and removed Scorpio is the most forceful competitor. If the cube should be solved by sheer willfulness alone, Scorpio will be the victor. Sagittarius, November 23rd to December 21st. As a Sagittarius, you may be insatiably curious, but your impatience with the petty details of cubing will soon get the better of you. Sagittarius, known for the candidest frankness, may be the only one of us all to actually ask, what was the fussing with the silly cube about? Capricorn, December 22nd to January 20th. Capricorn, another perceiving character, may have a good fortune with the cube. Unfortunately, your steady discipline is founded on a noble ambition, not just plain plodding stubbornness. A Capricorn's reserved, hardworking nature will solve the cube for a reward, not simply to be solving a puzzle. It might be worthy to mention that Saturn's influence over Capricorn could prove detrimental. The force of the rings over the squares. Aquarius, January 21st to February 19th. The probing Aquarius must try to find an answer to the cube. It is your nature to investigate the mysterious. You may be broad-minded enough to try anything, but you are also rebellious enough to fling tradition aside and simply give the task if you feel like it. After all, in Aquarius, you are famous for your incapacity to settle down to anything for very long. Pisces, February 20th to March 20th. Pisces has a meditative, imaginative nature, but your head is often in the clouds, and that is not a good advantage point for cubing. As the dreaming and practical Pisces, you may spend more time contemplating the future of cubing rather than cubing itself. But be aware, the sensitive Pisces may be overly melancholy about your abilities to solve the cube. You should remember that you are not particularly suited to any competition and stress. Alright, we're moving on to Zen and the Art of Cubing. Experience the challenge of cubing. Welcome the frustration of cubing, for it will help you grow. With the time, the act of cubing will become as natural as breathing, and the goal of 6 matched sides becomes a secondary to the meditative joy of cubing. Begin your cubing in a square room, if you like, for inspiration. Any solitary cubicle will do. Find a point of focus on your cube. Meditate on the process and outcome of your efforts. Let the colors wander through your mind. You might begin with blue as the calm and soothing sky, or white, the essence of purity for a fiery beginning, red or orange or yellow, color of the life-giving sun. Maybe you would choose green to remind you of Mother Earth's springtime. Wherever you choose to begin, it is your choice. No one else can decide for you. You may lose interest, you may feel incapable, but square your shoulders to the task. Let the twirling and flipping of the squares sweep you along. Let the flow of colors and movement carry you, and you will see beautiful patterns form. A sense of timelessness will come over you. Your fingers will seem to move. The color squares effortlessly. The motion may become your sole sense of purpose, and the destination of or act of finishing will lose importance, next to the experience of the moment. Don't force yourself to get the yellow side finished first, or the red, or any other color. You mustn't feel boxed in. Be patient, and then you will be rewarded as the squares seem to slip into place by magic. It's not necessary to compete with the 8-year-old neighborhood boy who can do it at the cube in 37.0952 seconds. You have your own unique pace. This is your time to play and experience the joy of doing it your way. No book can tell you where to start, what moves to make, what is right, how to twirl or flip. Only you can discover what is right for you. Is doing so, you will expand. Life will seem fuller and richer, and if you reach the goal, if you finish the task, begin the meditative cycle again. For your joy is not in the accomplishment of the singular task, not the completion of the physical act. Your sense of victory is the process through which you have traveled in the moments spent reaching the end, not the arrival of the end. Your purpose has not been simply to do the cube, but to use cubing as a consciousness raising, and thereby make yourself a more well-rounded human being. You'll be happy with this approach to cubing, for the odds are so tremendously against you are ever completing the cube. You'll need a rationalization to explain your actions. An open letter from the Inhumane Society. Dear Zen of Cubing readers, the Inhumane Society is a not-for-only-profit group formed to prevent cruelty to inhumane objects. In the past, we have written and lobbied for proposed legislative bills, sponsored lectures and workshops, developed a student education program, created halfway houses, all to help prevent and alleviate cruel treatment to a variety of objects, including shoes, automobiles, and record albums. Though we have had considerable success, our job is never finished. We've recently been made aware of a horrid new form of internet abuse, cube abuse. Why people would want to inflict damage on cubes is beyond our comprehension. Cubes are simple, multicolored little puzzles. They hurt no one, yet people hurt them. Why? Mostly because people are frustrated at their own inability to solve the puzzle of the cube. They vent their feelings on the innocent, inanimate object in an effort to avoid confrontation with the source of their frustration. People will hide cubes in drawers and closets, stuff them into bags, and even throw them in the garbage. This is no way to treat a cube. A cube likes to exist in a clean, well-lit, open area where its colors can shine and catch the attention of people. An even worse form of abuse is outright torture. Some incompetent cube solvers have been known to smash a cube to bits with a hammer or other large objects. Others have used irritating toxin paints to touch up the sides of the cube to appear to have been properly solved. This is not the worst of the abuse, but for reasons of common decency, we shall not describe the uglier forms. Possibly the most common form of abuse is to ignore a cube after a few futile attempts at solving it. For weeks, even months, a cube may sit lonely on a shelf, unspun, untwirled, even unflipped. The despair and uselessness that a cube feels is unimaginable. All that any cube asks from a human is an open place to reside, simple maintenance, and occasional but regular use. If this is too much for you to provide, then perhaps you shouldn't own a cube. Obviously, if there were less cubes, there wouldn't be abuse. Cubes would fall into the hands of people who truly wanted them. Unfortunately, with the proliferation of cuber farms, the population of cubes seems unlikely to drop. You might consider having your cube mittered. If you wish to help and end national shame of cube abuse, please send us a donation. Even $1 will help. The Inhumane Society is working day and night to prevent cruelty to cubes and all other inhuman objects. Thank you for your concern. Leslie Abigail Spinner, co-ordinator of the Inhumane Society. So that's the last chapter I will be reading. The final chapter of the book is called The Kama Sutra of Cubing, but I'm not going to put that on my channel. But thank you all so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this book, and I would really like to be able to see this book go back into print because I think it's just kind of a missing piece of cubing history and was written before its time. So yeah, thank you all for watching. and I will see you soon.